Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Kiki's Delivery Service from 1989. Now, this is continuing my quest to review all of the films of Studio Ghibli, and the fifth film, directed by Hayao Miyazaki. Kiki's Delivery Service is among one of Studio Ghibli's best films and Hayao Miyazaki's best films, but it's also kind of the breakout financial success of Studio Ghibli. There are other films, although Nausicaa and Castle in the Sky actually did do well, and even though My Neighbor Totoro and Grave of the Fireflies are considered two of the greatest animated films of all time, they weren't really financial successes when they were first released theatrically. And so Kiki's Delivery Service is really the first huge hit from Studio Ghibli. It was the highest grossing film in Japan in 1989, and it was a huge success. It led Studio Ghibli to become more than just a production company, and it would later in America be one of the first Studio Ghibli films released under their pact with Disney. Anytime I watch this film, I get very much sucked into it, and it's always probably been one of my favorite Hayao Miyazaki films. And mostly because it shows maturing and conquering your insecurities in such a way that's so akin to growing up. It's not done in a way that Kiki has to defeat the evil witch. There's no real bad guy in this movie. She just kind of has to do this internally. When she loses the ability to fly on a broom, when she can't talk to Gigi, it just shows the hardships of getting older when you're at that age that Kiki is. A 13-year-old witch who is, for the first time, leaving home, because in this movie, witches leave home at 13 to be completely independent and learn for their witch training. She kind of decides at a whim, because she hears the weather's going to be nice and there'll be a full moon, she's going to go and find the town that she's going to stay in for that year and leave her parents. She goes to a nice seaside town where she travels with her black cat Gigi and flies on her broom there, and makes friends with a pregnant baker woman named Osono and her husband, who run a bakery, and she lives in their vacant attic apartment and starts a delivery service where she can deliver things to people because she can fly on her broom. She also has to work in the bakery. While in the town, she makes friends with a local boy named Tombo and delivers to various people and learns stuff about herself along the way. Kiki's Delivery Service and a lot of Studio Ghibli films, especially in this period, I've noticed, aren't your typical three-act formulated films. So I can understand when people criticize them for not falling in line, not getting why they're such good movies. To me, though, the emotion and what you see Kiki go throughout this film speaks to me better than just making sure a film answers X, Y, and Z. That's a bunch of bullshit. And you should never let a film be dictated by films should be this way. I think that speaks to how good of a filmmaker and a writer and a director Hayao Miyazaki is, that he doesn't need all those things, but this film almost appears to be that. There's no actual happy ending in a lot of ways. There's a lot of bad things that will continue to happen to Kiki, and she even admits at the very end that there's still sadness, but she likes that town. Miyazaki, I read in this interview he gave in his book, Starting Point, it looks like a happy ending. She certainly gets over her insecurities in a certain regard, but it's not in the Disney tradition where her and Tombo fall in love and all her insecurities are kind of wiped away. It doesn't leave you with that impression, you know. Certainly Gigi stopped talking to her, which is really unfortunate. Apparently in the English dub they changed that, which I kind of remember. The first English dub I remember liking, and the second one I just really hated. I haven't seen either for 10 years because for me, I'd much rather watch original Japanese audio. To take away losing Gigi's voice is an important plot point and kind of shows you what Disney probably thinks of American audiences rather than what Miyazaki thinks of audiences. However, I've heard that all changes in the English dubs had to be approved by Studio Ghibli or Miyazaki, so I guess they approved of that. I disagree with that because I feel like you're taking away an important point, that it's not as much of a happy ending, because even though Gigi jumps on her at the end, he loses his voice, and that's part of growing up, is realizing that people change, that things aren't going to be taken care of. And Miyazaki made this film mainly about young girls who are coming to a major city trying to be manga artists. He talks about that quite a bit, or female animators working at Studio Ghibli, and how they were going through a very protective home with their family and then trying to make it in this world, especially when there are a lot of people trying to be manga artists at the time. It's kind of like your first year of college. I actually think The first year of college for me was one of the worst because you have to really adapt, you have to make it on your own. There's a lot of feeling that you're just gonna make it and you don't care what your parents have to say and everything like that. And that's great, and you should have that going in, but it's a lot harder being on your own than you really realize, or being independent. And that's the thing that Kiki has to discover. At the beginning of the film, she's very much excited to be independent. She can't wait to be independent, but having that independence is a lot scarier when you have to deal with certain things. Miyazaki talks a lot about, in the starting book, the interview is called "I wanted to show the various faces of one person in this film." And I think Kiki's Delivery Service does that. And what Miyazaki says in the interview, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not going to quote the whole thing. What he says in the interview is that a lot of times when you're younger, you say stupid things, you blurt out something, you're not as confident as you would be when you're older, and you kind of know how to control your emotions. And I think we all have said stupid or inappropriate things. Even now, you know, I feel like I do it a lot less now that I'm older, but every now and then you say something and you're just like, why did I do that? And you don't even have really a control over yourself at certain points. And there's a certain point in this film where Kiki says that to Tombo, where she just gets mad at him because these other friends are there, and she can't express that, you know, maybe she's disappointed that she liked hanging out with him, just the two of them, and she didn't really hang out with these people. Instead, she just gets arbitrarily mad at him. And there's a lot of times in your life that that's going to happen to you, especially if you're younger. You won't react in the right way. You do something inappropriate. Kiki feels bad about it, and I've had that happen to me in my life. What Miyazaki was showing is that's part of growing up. With Kiki learning these things not through a conflict with a major antagonist, but through herself, makes this film so much more relatable to me. And it feels like when I was younger, but much like the location of this film, you don't really know where this film takes place. It was actually based on a town in Sweden where they visited, but this film feels very universal, that I've been able to watch it many different times in my life and be able to relate to it in many different ways. And I think that's kind of the beauty of Hayao Miyazaki, when he really is working with the subject matter. And what he does with Kiki's Delivery Service is he says more about growing up than I think I've seen from any film, because he shows the beauty and the ugliness to it. And as much as Kiki's a very cute character, she's got a great bow on her head, she's got a cute little black cat, and it's nice to see her fly around and deliver packages to people and be a pleasant young girl. But really why Kiki's Delivery Service has lived on and become such a classic, and one of the big reasons I think it's resonated with me so much, is it shows so much of growing up in a way that's not trying to show the harsh realities or something, but is really trying to show you what you have to go through as a person when you grow up, and how you'll do stupid things, but also how you'll do great things and be responsible, and how you'll have many different attitudes around different people. How she acts around the grandma who she's delivering the pumpkin and herring pie to her daughter, how she reacts around Tombo, how she reacts around the bakers. All these things are different. He really does show how someone has many different faces through one person. And I think that's probably a really good description of Kiki as a character, because you look at like Castle in the Sky, or you look at Nausicaa, those are very good and well-defined characters, but they don't act differently towards different people. In a way, they're stronger characters in those films because they have such distinct personalities, and they're not going to change for whatever person. Kiki is insecure and doesn't have that yet. She's not this strong, ready-made personality. So she's going to react differently to different people. You can still do that and have a strong personality, but I think Miyazaki's point with Kiki acting this way was that she wasn't entirely sure of herself and felt she had to act this way towards different people. This film kind of continues Miyazaki's tradition of making Japanese films that obviously take place in Europe. It's interesting that he made more of a Japanese film with Totoro than he just completely goes back to his style before, but he comes to it with more of what he learned from doing something like Totoro, more of the kind of storyteller he was now. And it almost kind of reminds me more of what Takahata would do, because it's kind of more of a character piece, and that's more of something Takahata is known for than Miyazaki. And actually the author of the original manga, Iko Kadato, whose name I'm probably mispronouncing pretty badly, wanted to pick either Hayao Miyazaki or Isao Takahata. But in a way I feel like you get kind of both styles, although I don't see Takahata's name on the credits anywhere. I'm sure they talked about it, but I don't think he worked on it enough to have been credited. Hayao Miyazaki did work on this directly after working on Totoro, but I kind of get that sense on both Totoro and this, but more so in this because it's such a kind of a character piece and it has much more of a looser plot. I'm noticing that with Ghibli's films is after Castle in the Sky. Castle in the Sky was much more traditional, and then they seem to get less and less traditional. And Miyazaki seems to be growing a lot as a storyteller. That's one of the reasons Kiki's Delivery Service has such a resonance and became such a major hit, is because if you are young and growing up, not just if you're a young girl, although I think this is an amazingly good film for young girls. There's not enough films that capture what it's like to be young and growing up as much as Kiki's Delivery Service. And it is a great film for young girls, but it's also a great film for anyone growing up. And I think that's what I noticed about it. It's like I've had those moments where I just like fell onto my bed and regretted what had just happened that day, or felt crappy that day, or felt very isolated. The original novel is a lot different. Those were mainly Miyazaki's ideas. The author actually didn't like it originally when she heard about them, but then Miyazaki brought her to Studio Ghibli and showed her what they were doing, and she changed her mind. But this was almost canceled, and actually took a lot of different forms. They thought about making it a TV special, an hour-long TV special. '89 was a big year. The late '80s were a big time in animation. You had Disney coming out with Little Mermaid. Akira came out a year before this. A year before this film, in '88, Totoro and Grave of the Fireflies came out. And it was just this time where all these big, great, major animated works were coming out. When I look at what Studio Ghibli was doing, it was more concerned with this character. And when I look at studios that have a real resonance with audiences, it's character pieces. It's, I know Kiki. I know the kind of person Kiki is. And that really means more than an action sequence, than a big special effects sequence. I know everyone says all people care about is explosions and movie stars and all that stuff. Yeah, sure, they do like that. But if you've ever wondered why something becomes a film that resonates and people still talk about and everything like that, it has a lot more to do with the fact that the audience can see something in that person. They can be like, I know that guy, or I've felt that before. And that means a lot. And that's really all Kiki is trying to do. Seeing her talk with Ursula, the artist, and seeing her grow as a person and learn through her little business, which Miyazaki actually didn't want her to become a success and that to be the ending, because he didn't want it to be monetarily. It had to be something within her. Of course, like the character of Gigi, I do own a black cat, but I've always liked the character of Gigi. And I like the sad nature of Gigi not wanting to talk anymore. Gigi's just talking like a cat. I think that might be because he has a girlfriend and he wants to be more of a cat. It's something that Kiki lost in her magic. I like that it doesn't spell it out for you, so it's really debatable how it happened. But I think it shows, you know, some friends you have will change and be different, and you kind of just have to learn to accept that. And Kiki kind of does and still loves Gigi no matter what. This film really launched Studio Ghibli to being this amazing box office juggernaut in Japan, and made it a force to be reckoned with. It certainly was before, and they announced themselves to the world. There's a difference between a smash hit and making your budget back and doing okay, and it really led financially for Studio Ghibli to be more of a studio, and it was kind of more of a production company before. Everyone was just kind of temps until, you know, the next production, and then they'd kind of rehire everyone. And this led them to be able to develop other animators, which you'll see later throughout their filmography how they have other directors, but they were developing them through Studio Ghibli. And that really kind of started to change with the success of Kiki's Delivery Service. What Kiki's Delivery Service does is it portrays something about a young girl, but it's not doing it in a very Hollywood way. It's about a witch who has a delivery service, yet I'm really more captivated by what Miyazaki does with the character than her flying and everything like that. All of this continues Miyazaki's love of flight, and he does some amazing flying sequences throughout this film. What makes this film special is the character of Kiki and how he shows the many sides of her and the many faces of that character, and the many faces we have as we grow up and how we change, how we act differently, from the way we treat our parents to the way we act at school and the way we're in front of our friends. And that's something Kiki captures better than any film I've ever seen about growing up, in a way that just shows how much of a master storyteller he is. Because this film doesn't feel like cutesy kids film about a witch with a delivery service, but it does at the same time. And I think that shows how great of a director and a writer Hayao Miyazaki was, and how powerful he could really be as a director and use Studio Ghibli to make a really great film with a very well developed well-developed, interesting, complicated character. So if you have seen Kiki's Delivery Service and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. Check out my playlist of my other Studio Ghibli reviews in the annotation below, and thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.